Hi everyone, welcome back. So here's the thing, if you're someone looking to move to the UK, in most cases, a skilled worker visa is what you'll need to get. I've spoken about it at length in my previous videos, but this year in particular, there have been visa updates flying all over the place. And so a lot of the criteria for the skilled worker visa has drastically changed. It's crazy. So if you're looking to move to the UK, this video is going to tell you all about the work visa options you've got, updates on the skilled worker visa, including the new criteria, how to apply, and what you need to do to keep in mind, and some key pieces of information about this visa you probably didn't know, which can help you earn more. I'm Ashika, and on this channel, we talk about moving across the world for that job or to study. If you have a question, drop me a comment below or DM me on Instagram. And with that, let's dive in. Now, for starters, let's understand how the visa system works in the UK. For most typical work visas, you would need to keep two things in mind. You would need to be offered a job offer for an eligible job in the UK that offers sponsorship by a licensed sponsor. And secondly, you would need a work visa or a work permit. Let's take this one at a time. First of all, the job you are offered needs to be eligible to offer you sponsorship. Not all jobs can offer you sponsorship in the UK. For a job to be eligible, it needs to comply with minimum wages and working time regulations, among other requirements. The easiest way for you to check if the role that you do is eligible or not is to head over to the gov.uk page and check it right here. It's a long list, so you'd best do a Ctrl F and search for the job title that you're interested in. Now, let's assume you're looking for the role of a mechanical engineer. A quick search will show you that the job is eligible. Now, what if you're a cook? Nope, it's not there. But it's not listed, so you need to be smarter. Check for a different name for the role. For instance, look for the role of a chef, and yup, it's listed. So if you don't see the role that you're interested in, don't lose heart. Try similar other roles and you might get lucky. Next, going back to licensed sponsors I mentioned earlier. Yes, there are literally hundreds of thousands of jobs available in the UK right now. Look right here. So you might be tempted to think that any one of those companies can sponsor you, but unfortunately, that's not how it works in the UK. In the UK, only licensed sponsors can offer you sponsorship, and to be a licensed sponsor, an organization would need to have a license that was issued by the government permitting them to offer sponsorship. This includes unpaid work done too, for instance, running a charity, which means no, your relatives, your friends cannot sponsor your work visa even if they are British citizens. Even if they run their own organization in the UK, they still can't sponsor you unless they hold a license to sponsor. And if someone you do know wants to sponsor you, it's not as simple as just applying for a license. The business by itself needs to be eligible, and so does the job, because not all jobs are eligible for sponsorship in the UK. So, back to step one. You need to be offered a job offer for an eligible job in the UK that offers sponsorship by a licensed sponsor. Next, you would need a work visa or a work permit. If you want to work in the UK, you've got a couple of options, and the skilled worker visa is not the only option you have. So if you head over to the gov.uk page, you'll see all of the options listed there, and there are quite a few visas. Like you see, the most popular visas are the skilled worker visa and the healthcare worker visa. If you aren't sure of the difference, any healthcare roles should apply for health and care worker visas and not a skilled worker visa, because the criteria is very different and you won't have to pay the health surcharge if you're a healthcare worker. There are visas that don't require you to have a job to apply for those visas. There's a different set of visas in case you've been sent by your employer from your country of work to work in the UK for a certain duration. There's also temporary visas, which are visas for very short durations and a couple of months up to 2 years. Then there's a visa in case you want to start your own innovative business in the UK, and a few others that don't strictly fall in these categories. Bottom line, a lot of visas. Now, before I move ahead, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and drop me a comment below if you have any questions after watching this video, or any questions otherwise. Now, the visa we're interested in today is the skilled worker visa, so let's visit that page. The eligibility mentions a couple of points we've already covered. You need to be offered a job by a licensed sponsor. This licensed sponsor needs to provide you with a COS, or a certificate of sponsorship. And that is something that will be required when you apply, or they apply, for a work permit. Apart from that, it needs to be an eligible role. Also, you need to be able to speak, write, read and understand English, and you will have to take an English language test. Now, citizens of some countries don't need that test, and you can check here for more information. You also don't need to take an English test if you did your graduation or your postgrad in English. And if that's the case, you would need to write to ECCTIS for a confirmation. And you need to be paid a minimum salary for this role. Now, the last point in particular has come to be a huge talking point of late. If you click on this link which says the eligibility depends on your job, it will take you to a whole different page, which is really important. The minimum salary they referenced needs to be the highest of these three options: £26,200 per year or £10.75 per hour, or the going rate for the type of job you'll be doing. Now, the bad news is that, like you might have heard, come spring, and at the time of making this video, the official date hasn't been announced, the £26,200 per year will change to £38,700, which is substantially higher. Now, keep in mind, as per further announcements made by the government, in December, this amount is not fixed. For instance, if you are a new entrant to the UK job market, you may be offered a 30% discount on the going rate of your job. If you aren't sure who qualifies as a new entrant is someone who is under the age of 26 on the date they make that application and is applying for a maximum period of 3 years leave as a skilled worker. Those who are sponsored in postdoctorate research positions, those in professional training or studying for professional qualifications, registration or chartered status, or a recent graduate or in professional training. So students studying in the UK, for instance, qualify for this, which then reduces the salary threshold for them to apply for a skilled worker visa that's relevant to your job. Apart from this, you could also have a STEM PhD level qualification that's relevant to your job, or if you have a postdoctoral position in science or higher education, or if your job falls under the shortage occupation list. Now, again, this is a huge issue because of the latest visa changes announced by the government. At the moment, this is the shortage occupation list. Now, don't get confused because this page looks very similar to the list of eligible occupations I showed you a little earlier, but this is the list of jobs on the shortage occupation list. A shortage occupation list is basically a list of jobs that are currently facing a shortage in terms of labor in the UK and so are highly required in the UK. Earlier, you could be paid 80% of the going rate for these jobs and still be eligible to apply for a skilled worker visa. But the challenge we're now facing ourselves with is that the UK government is either going to entirely scrap this list or shorten this list drastically. At this point, the decision on what to do about the shortage occupation list hasn't been made, but it will be made very soon, and it's unlikely it's going to be very good news. Your skilled worker visa can be issued for up to 5 years when you first issue it, and it honestly depends on the length of your job if it has a fixed duration. But once your 5 years are near completion, you can apply to extend it as many times as you like, so long as you still meet the eligibility. And after you've completed 5 years, you can go ahead and apply for an ILR or an indefinite leave to remain, which is similar to a residence permit, which is also why this visa is so popular. 1 year after that, you can apply for British citizenship. This visa also allows you to bring your dependents along with you, and your dependents are either your partner and your children. Unfortunately, parents don't count here. There are a few exceptions where you can bring your parents, but that's a whole different topic. Your dependents can live with you in the UK as long as you and your visa are valid and your partner is allowed to work in the UK, which is great if you ask me. Now, something interesting about the skilled worker visa, and I want to share this because there's a lot of confusion and misinformation about this. If you're on a skilled worker visa, it means a company sponsored your visa. But despite that, technically you can work up to 20 hours in another job and earn twice. Or you can work for your own business apart from the job that you've been sponsored for in 2 situations. You either do a second job in the same occupation code that you were sponsored for. For instance, if you were a graphic designer, you can work in another firm as a graphic designer. You just can't work as a photographer, for instance. Or you work in any job that falls under the shortage occupation list. So assume you're a graphic designer, but you were also trained as a web designer. By all means, take up that second job for up to 20 hours or start your own web design firm or freelance. If the work is more than 20 hours a week, you will need to get sponsored by both companies, which also means that if it's your own business, you can't officially work for more than 20 hours a week. If you're on a skilled worker visa, you would need to update your visa if you switch your job to another job that offers sponsorship with a different employer. or if your occupation code changes, if the role you're doing changes, or if you were sponsored for a role on the shortage occupation list, but you're switching to a job that's not on the shortage occupation list. And remember, your dependents would also need to update their visas either with you or separately. You're also allowed to switch to this visa if you're on another visa in the UK, except in these situations. If you're on a visit visa, a lot of folks ask me if they can get a visit visa and come to the UK and look for a job. Yes, you can. There's nothing stopping you from looking for a job, but if you do get one, you will have to leave the UK, apply for a skilled worker visa in your country of residence, and only travel to the UK after you receive this visa. You can't switch if you're on a short-term student visa, on a seasonal worker visa, or if you're a domestic worker in a private household, and there are more conditions that you can read about over here. If you're on a student visa in the UK, there are specific rules regarding that too. You have to have completed the course you were sponsored to study. Your job start date can only be after your course has been finished. And you have to have studied for a PhD for at least 24 months. Now, how much you pay for a skilled worker visa honestly depends on how you're applying, whether it's from outside the UK or if you're switching from within the UK on a different visa, or if you're updating your visa. All of the costs are mentioned right here, but I'll quickly explain if you're applying from outside the country, because this one can be a little confusing. There are different buckets that this total cost falls under. There's the application fee, the health surcharge, and the cost of supporting yourself in the UK. Now, the application fee is fairly simple. If your visa is up to 3 years, it's £719 per person. If your visa is for more than 3 years, it's £1,420 per person. And if you're on the shortage occupation list, there are different rates. Up to 3 years is £551. More than 3 years is £1,084. The health surcharge is a little more complicated because it's around £624, but it can be more, and it's per person per year. So ideally, you need to fill up this form to get to know how much you will have to pay, and you need at least £1,270 in your bank account to show that you can support yourself in the UK. For your dependents, you need £285 for your partner, £315 for one child, and £200 for every additional child. So let's take some examples. Assume you're a skilled worker and you're applying for a 3-year visa with no dependents and your job isn't on the shortage occupation list. You will pay £2,591 and you'll need £1,270 in your account. Now assume you're a family of 4 applying for a skilled worker visa for 5 years and again not one on the shortage occupation list. You'll instead pay $20,656 plus you'll need $2,070 in your account. Now, it's quite a bit of money, which is why you need to be aware for starters, and you need to understand that just sometimes you might need to be upfront and ask if your employer can bear the costs, because there are employers who do, especially employers who really want to hire the right talent. So it is important to have these discussions. Now, you can apply for your visa online. You will have to go to a biometric center once you've applied, but it is a fairly simple process. All the documents you need to apply are clearly mentioned here. Just one thing out of the ordinary. If you're applying from certain countries, you will need to take a TB test. If you're Indian like me, you will need to take this test from an approved hospital, and you'll find that entire list here. If you work in certain sectors like education or healthcare, you will also need to apply for a criminal record check. And that's everything you need to know. Now, filling out the application online can be really tedious, yes, but unfortunately there's no workaround. Now, I know it overwhelms a lot of people, especially if you don't know what the forms look like and what they ask of you, which is why I made a tutorial guided video on how you can fill out the application. Now, bear in mind that this application video was made last year, so it's not 100% updated with the latest announcements, but it will give you a very clear idea of what you need to click on, what you need to fill, and what is required of you. If you'd like to watch that, click here. And thanks for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if it's helped you, and leave a comment below if you have any questions.